of you have not played any games in Vegas in this trip? It can be slot machine. Oh, very cool. A lot of very, very wise people. Now for those of us who have played the game, I want you to start thinking about the moment you hit that button in the on the slot machine, or took a peek at your card, or rolled the dice, and think about the feeling you have. We all play for entertainment, but as part of that is the hope for an opportunity to present itself, and we hit the jackpot, right? So today, we are here to talk about a greater opportunity in our industry that has presented itself. And it's a chance for us to really use some new technology to shape our future, to shape our industry together, and use the technology to really upscale our career and what we do on a daily basis. So welcome to this session. My name is Atena Reyhani. I'm Chief Product Officer with ContractPodAi. And today I have a pleasure that Hunter Simon, he's a VP of Business Affairs and GC at Technicolor, to join me today. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So we have had at ContractPod a pleasure of working with you for a couple of years now, since 2019. So if you don't mind, giving our audience a little bit more background about you and about the
Sure, I'll be real quick. So as Atena said, I'm the General Counsel of Technicolor Group. We famously make movies. We do visual effects and animation for feature films, for advertising, for games. If you remember old movie posters that in Technicolor, that's our legacy. We had the original patent to colorize films. We don't actually do that any longer and process billions of feet of films. We're a digital company, all digital, for visual effects and animation for award-winning films like Lion King and Mufasa that just dropped its trailer the other day, to SpongeBob SquarePants animation movies, to AAA games. I've been with the company since 2007 in a lot of different roles, and having been there for, nearly 17 years, I wear lots of different hats. We're a small legal department. I think I've now got about 8 people working with me internationally. It's just me and a paralegal actually in Los Angeles, with people in India, in Paris, in London, in Montreal, and then remote services all over the globe. We started our journey of trying to optimize our workflows probably day one when I started, but it took a while for the change management. And it wasn't until about 2018 where I started to get some real traction on adopting CLM and starting to really build out some core workflows and processes, some of which we'll talk a little bit about today, but those that I think are on that sort of journey of iterative steps from taking it from a one-to-one relationship between lawyer and stakeholder to a one-to-many scaled environment using generative AI.
Amazing. And throughout your journey, in terms of continuously bringing the latest technology and pioneering it and piloting it, you have always been, very active in identifying opportunities.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think it was Tony Robbins who said, if you change nothing, then nothing changes, right? And the reality is that change is inevitable. It's the one thing. They say death and taxes, but the reality is this change is inevitable. So I think your only option really is growth at the end of the day. So for me, trying to make sure that we can do more with less, meet the demands of evolving businesses is critical. And leveraging different tools and tool sets, and particularly the growth of generative AI is huge. And I think we adopted ContractPod as an example before it had the AI in the name, but it did actually have artificial intelligence in the product in its earliest stage. And that was one of the core differentiators for me, actually.
Amazing. And talking about the change, we are really in the industry seeing tremendous changes that are being, perceived and predicted by, many people. That shows from the research perspective, that shows from actions and decisions that are being made across the industry. And And to basically paint a little bit of a picture about the opportunity, I wanted to share with you a couple of data points and research that has been done. So one of the surveys that has been done recently from executive and a CEO's perspective globally shows more than 45% of CEOs globally anticipate changes to their business model needed in the next decade to stay viable. Right? So this is prevalent of company sizes and the industry. People are really seeing the need that at the longer term, and 10 years, they need to take a look at what are the areas of opportunities and how they need to position themselves. Now, from the use case perspective, there are many areas of opportunities. That is from communication perspective, contracting, procurement, and on, right? We are looking at use cases that were not possible before in the market, but now with the technology, we can bring the information that is within the contract and then also bring the adjacent information like company policies, procedures, regulatory requirements, and not only do the analysis, but actually drive conclusions that can, again, going back to the opportunity we spoke about, how can we use this technology to really elevate what we are doing and focus on more strategic work, right? Now, if we zoom into this a little bit more, we're seeing a little bit of a shorter term anticipated impact in the market, including increase in the quality of product and services that people across the industry are going to offer. We are seeing it already. Our customers are seeing it already. Our partners are seeing it already, that using the technology, they can elevate the quality of product and services they can offer to the market. And naturally, that translates to an increase of intensity in the competitive landscape for everyone as we take a look at what is to come in the next 1 to 3 years, right? So these are very interesting data points because as we take a look at how we can, impact our day-to-day life, but also what are the type of business values that we are bringing to our organization, because we need to go have these conversations with our executives as well to basically onboard a new technology and how we can, shape the future. And another interesting point is how we are going to need new skill sets. And we are going to need new tools in the short future so that we can actually, compete in that landscape. So at the end of the day, the businesses are going to take a look at how they're going to change the way that they bring value and deliver that value to their customers. So this is from the survey perspective, CEOs globally. You see that at Technicolor, any conversations around that?
100%. In fact, yesterday I was on a management committee call with our CEO, and she was talking about the sort of the state of the union, if you will, for our company. As many of you guys know, in the movie industry, we just recently came through not only the pandemic, but 2 massive strikes, which hit the industry really hard. And the industry is slowly starting to build back up and greenlight new films. As we are looking for new revenues, we are also looking at ways to reduce costs. And, at its most basic level, those models, the surveys that you're talking about in terms of change management, I think there's really only 2 ways that these companies are going to be able to survive. One is to increase revenue at margin, but the other one is to reduce your cost of sales, right? And that's enabling functions like us who are looking at ways to operationalize and improve workflow throughput, develop new skills at a lower cost basis. So from my perspective, I said I have 8 lawyers on my team globally. I think we're probably right-sized for the size of business that we are today, but we expect over the course of the next 2 to 3 years to double the size of our business. What won't happen with the benefit of generative AI and use of workflows, I won't be doubling the size of the legal team. What I will be doing though is changing the skill sets of the legal team and adding new jobs at a different cost basis that don't necessarily have to be at the same point of sale. So there's all sorts of opportunities as you look at lowering your cost basis to rise the margin and generate additional cash flows for the business. With leveraging tools like this and generative AI, generally speaking. And it can be in multiple different tools linked together. It can be in a single enterprise level tool. But I think the notion of generative AI to be able to accelerate the speed to market in terms of cash to the company from a contracting perspective is incredibly important, in doing that at a lower cost basis relative to our top line sales.
That's amazing. And from the legal perspective, also just connecting the data points to what is very closely relevant to us. Earlier this year, we actually did a survey from legal professionals globally, and we actually asked them how often they're using generative AI. Of course, this is changing, if not weekly basis, if not daily basis, on a weekly basis. But how they're using generative AI, what are the areas of use cases they are actually applying GenAI today, and what are the benefits that they are seeing? And the results are impressive. Number one, everyone is in the exploration phase of identifying the opportunities to go after, but then also contract review and analysis and doing the redlining, getting redline recommendations, so on and so forth, was on top of the list from the use case perspective. And people have started, already reporting time saving and efficiency type of, outcome that is very promising. Now, Hunter, I know you actually have done some pilot with Leah, our GenAI solution. And
yeah.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, no, for sure. I love this slide. I mean, I think there's a couple things about the slide. The first thing is I remember a story my father told me years ago. He taught an MBA program at UCLA, and he asked everybody in the class, how many of you want to be salespeople when you finish your MBA program? And one or two people raised their hand. And remind me, for any of those of you that were at the opening session where Jen McCarran asked everybody, who's a data analyst? And in the table, right behind me, one person screamed, I'm a data analyst! It was awesome. He finished the lecture series that day, and the notion was that you're always selling something, whether you're selling your own services or you're selling a product or somebody else's service, you're always selling something. So he asked the question at the end of the class, how many of you want to be salespeople? Of course, everybody raised their hand. I have no idea if Jen's going to do closing comments and ask the same question, but I hope actually after all of these sessions that everybody raised their hand and looks at this survey and says, well, it's 6%. That was the one person that screamed in the back of the room. And quite frankly, I think as all of us start to create some change management in the industry, that the notion of sort of having structured objective data analytics is actually going to be the driver to all those things. So the first most important thing is I'm going to raise my hand and say I'm a data analyst too. I think that's the key to driving all of that. And speaking of our run with Leah Copilot, so we recently had a project. We had a really unique finance/M&A type structuring deal. We had about 6,000 pages of data that we had to review to ask really unique questions, maybe a dozen or so questions that your typical extraction model, which we had when we started in 2019, would review a contract and it would produce a summary of a specific term. This was a really unique transaction, so we needed to ask some really unique questions. So we put our projects into Leah Copilot. We produced all dozen or so questions in a multi-query set, and in a matter of 2 days, 2 lawyers, myself and one other lawyer, produced a report that was a critical, actionable report in 2 days against about 6,000 pages worth of data without having to leverage the cost of outside counsel to review it. Neither of us worked throughout the night. I went home, I took my son to his soccer practice that night. I was able to cook dinner that night and wake up at a reasonable time the next morning. Also considering the fact that all of my stakeholders are actually in Europe. So it was probably a little bit less than 2 days. So if you think about the amount of data that we were able to process, now the first pass was pretty accurate, it was pretty good. And I look at this tool, and as I said earlier, I've got 8 people on my team. I don't expect to have fewer people on my team. I don't expect to reduce costs. Generative AI, to me, isn't a replacement for the human element. It's an additive element. It requires skilled technicians, skilled lawyers to actually look at the output and say, this makes sense or this doesn't make sense. The nice thing about LEA and generative AI is it not only gives you your analysis and your conclusion, but it also gives you the resource data. So when you're looking at it as a lawyer, myself, I'm able to look at it and say, that resonates, that makes sense, I know these contracts, or there's something that's a hallucination here. It was few and far between, but it also told you exactly where the resource was. So your time to produce that report was extremely accelerated. So from our perspective, we had a zero cost for external spend on that. And we had, I don't know how many different outside counsel we were working on the overall deal. But for this particular activity, zero for external cost. Increase in scalability, what probably would have taken a team of lawyers multiple days to do a Word spreadsheet was actually resourced and done in about 2 days. I think the interesting challenge, and it sort of harkens back to the prior slide, is we did have some hiccups in the process. It wasn't actually generative AI was the hiccup. It was learning the new skill set. It was data integrity, data structure. So we were taking our data from one data set into another data set. And I remember I did the first multi-query test, and I got really weird results. And so, apropos of your earlier slide, there are new skill sets that people are going to learn. This is why I say we'll change the cost basis and develop a team of people who are doing other things besides just pure sort of legal work. I had to learn prompt engineering. I had not done that before. And as much as I feel like I'm precise with my words when I write, apparently I just didn't quite know how to do it. But once we figured that out, I was able to go do all the other things in personal opportunity costs. Like I said, I was able to go to my son's soccer practice and cook dinner for my kids after practice.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's an amazing story. Thank you for sharing that. Also, the new skill set also evolving as the technology is evolving. So that's all we have spoken so far is indicative of the opportunity for us to now use new tools and make that difference. Now, let's switch the view a little bit from the technology perspective, because if you think about it from the evolution of AI, and as Henry was saying earlier, we have been in the AI industry for a long time now and very familiar with the processes of what it works, what doesn't work, and what are the areas that we need to really work on and put our investment in. Now, GenAI is not a new thing, right? It has been on the market's radar, it has been on our radar, it was on the R&D from the product initiatives perspective at ContractPodAi. But 18 months ago, with the general availability of large language models at enterprise level, now that started a great opportunity for us to be able to integrate it with our solution that considers all of the privacy and security and other aspects of the product, and basically build features and functionality that are for the future of what we are going to do and how we are going to shape and define the future. Now, even within this 18 months, the market has changed, the technology has changed. So if you want to take a look at it, like from the beginning, at the initial stage, we had solutions that were consuming single large language model or GenAI, like GPT or other solutions, and creating targeted use cases for a very particular task, right? And as the complexity of the use cases increased, we shifted to multi-large language model strategy. And as we took a look at solving legal problems and solving more complex problems, a larger spectrum of legal use cases, now it's time for expert models in legal domain and embedded frameworks. And what do I mean by that? Let's just for a moment think about how we do legal work, right? When we onboard generative AI technology into our business, we should think about it exactly or as close as possible to how we do our legal work and how do we onboard legal expertise. How do we onboard legal expertise? We want to hire a new person. You take a look at legal expertise. So that expertise is typically industry specific. it is domain specific, sometimes jurisdiction specific, multi-jurisdiction. You really go through a very extensive process to bring someone on board. Then what do? You onboard them to your company's standards, policies, procedures. How do we do business? How do we do contracting, right? So if you want to get a contracting advice, if you want to get a analysis on your third-party contract, you don't go bring a smart person up the street and basically say, because you're smart, I'm going to get my legal advice from you, right? So you go through that process. It's very similar when we take a look at bringing GenAI to legal. And that is so important as we take a look at this, because there are some byproduct risk of not incorporating the right product into your business. Then it not only doesn't solve targeted problems, it also introduces new risk of hallucination, the risk of not bringing relevant data to your business, right? So there are some aspects that we wanted to share with you that we learned along the way. And number one was bringing expert models and having a legal vertical solutions on top of the large language models and GenAI, right? So if there is a product, or in legal or other industries, if you are solving a complex domain-specific problem and you want to get relevant, accurate, and comprehensive output, you need a solution on top of the large language models that further instruct the AI on what to do so that it's like that onboarding process that we were speaking about earlier, right? So we talked about the spectrum of use cases. So what I wanted to share is that for us at ContractPodAi, when we were building Leah, we identified a need of creating a GenAI ecosystem. And that GenAI ecosystem, it brings in multiple best-in-class large language models to the solution. Why? Because when it comes to AI, even traditional AI, right, in your experience also, there is no one size fit all, right? Some AI are better and more expert. Some AI models are good in giving you faster responses. So depending on what use case you're going after, what is your complexity need, what is your velocity need, what is your scale of the knowledge base that you're going to go after, you are going to need different large language models. And sometimes you actually need to combine them together to solve one problem, right? It's like bringing a team of people together to solve a problem. Now we are bringing a team of AI together to solve a problem. Now, we do need to have legal GenAI. So what we did was that we actually, through partnership, one of our partnership, for example, is like our partnership with Google, that we created legal specific large language models. So we trained large language model on legal data that's fully supervised, and it's based on our historical data, because we actually, before GenAI, created proprietary legal models. And then we combined this legal large language models with our solution layer that has legal specific frameworks to really guide AI further in terms of what to do. I mean, at the end of the day, you cannot rely on the large language model to give you that relevant information and accurate information and not to hallucinate. All of that requires deep engineering and different techniques in the solution layer to really accomplish what we needed to accomplish. Then we talked about your processes, your procedures, your regulatory requirement. Where does that go? We can't give baseline AI models your data for privacy purposes. We don't want them to learn at that layer, but there is an opportunity at that solution layer in the middle to have all of the understanding that you needed to have do process the data, apply your policies, procedures, relevant information, and give the relevant result that is actually recommendation for you and your organization. So with incorporating the whole ecosystem, we were able to build a lot of GenAI based applications that are very easy and straightforward to use. Because another thing is, as we are exploring the opportunities of GenAI into our businesses, we see it and we hear it on a daily basis that time to value is the key. Everyone wants to explore the opportunities for fast ROI and then expand or refine after they actually see it in action. Their customers being their users get used to it. Right?
I think that's absolutely right. I think time to value is really, really critical. And I think one of the interesting things about that particular slide actually, and you talked a little bit about it, which is the solutions layer. The alternative to time to value and speed is security and risk mitigation, right? In the legal department, I know we've got a mixture of lawyers and legal operations people who are non-lawyers, but at the end of the day, the lawyers are that last mile of the telephonic chain, right? And so we're the last mile of risk. And so when we onboard generative AI, one of the real critical decision pieces for us, and I think ContractPod solved it really elegantly, is to ensure that you've got a solutions layer that has all of the benefit of the large language models. So it's inherently intelligent, but it doesn't know what to do with any of that intelligence until you tell it what to do with essentially your playbook, if you will. So there's the human element, right? You tell it how you want to do business, and it inherently knows how to connect those two things in its predictive models instantaneously to provide the data. So it's not actually learning, it's not sentient. It's not like, I don't know, for any of you, I'm sort of a little bit of a movie buff, so Iron Man and Robert Downey Jr., who talked to his computer Jarvis, and it was like, just build me an Iron Man suit, and all of a sudden Iron Man just existed. That's not what happens, obviously, in generative AI, right? It is intelligent, but you have to actually give it the set of rules, and then it applies those rules against its general intelligence to provide you information. But the second you pull that playbook away, it doesn't have any memory of what you've done. So it's not learning necessarily. It's not like I'm training my 13-year-old son, my 10-year-old daughter. They're learning. They're sentient beings. So I'm hoping they're ultimately going to go off and be productive human beings in society and make their own independent decisions. I don't ever expect Gen AI to make its own independent decisions based on my playbook. The second I change the playbook, I change the decisions that it makes. The second that I pull the playbook, it no longer makes any of those decisions. It doesn't actually learn from my data, so my data is never actually exposed either to the public or to any of ContractPod's other customers. That was a really critical piece for me to be able to understand that solutions layer and also understand, again, the human element. So it, again, drives from an operations perspective and a legal operations perspective, really imperative dependence on the notion of playbooks and starting to document workflows and processes. And it's not just the notion of bringing people in to and train them over time. You really got to start documenting what you're doing to be able to harness the real power of generative AI.
Absolutely, and that was a great point, that AI is not going to make the decision for us. It's going to be the tool that we are going to use to make faster and better decisions in our organization, and take our work and industry to the next level. Thank you very much for joining us today.